We drink beer like this when we're too lazy to brew. But there's no reason to be too lazy when you can do it bare bones in the backyard, because it's so easy. And it starts with 5 gallons of water and a fire and a pot, pretty basic. The basis for beer is, besides the water, is malt, which today is going to be in the form of malt syrup, which is made from barley grains which have been sprouted. The enzymes in the barley have transformed the starch into fermentable sugars. That gets cooked down and made to syrup, or you can just use grain. That's down here. This is raw barley. I bought it from the farmer this morning, the guy who grew it. And this, you have to sprout it and then dry it very carefully. And then you'll end up with this product right here. This is crystal malt, which is a little bit sweet, and it has the malty taste that you think of when you think of beer. We're going to use that for flavoring, but not for the basis of the actual fermentable sugars, which is this syrup. The other thing that goes in that gives it its flavor is the hops here, which give it both the bitterness and the aroma that you get in beer, especially in homebrew. And then the last thing that goes in is going to be this here yeast. It consumes the fermentable sugars and makes them into alcohol and carbon dioxide. So that's at the end when things are cooled a bit. And if you'd like to see what hops look like on the vine, I can show you over there. These are actually Cascades, which is another Oregon variety. And these are the flowers. It's the part we're interested in. There's that yellow pollen, and that's what really gives the beer its taste. These hops are not quite ready, or we'd be using them today. They need another week or so. So anyway, we'll come back next week and use those ones. Okay, so now that we've got a rolling boil, we're going to take all this malt syrup. This is about 7.5 pounds of it. And we're going to put it all in here to boil for about the next hour. And this is incredibly sticky and incredibly messy, which is another reason to do this outdoors. Because when it boils over onto the stove, it's a god almighty mess. So you have to be really careful about keeping stuff clean. But at this phase, it's going to boil for about an hour. So if you get bad things in there, if your stuff isn't perfectly clean, then it doesn't really hurt anything at all. So that's that. This is about 1 pound of crystal malt. That's going to go in now too. And this is 2 ounces of hops, and I'm going to put in 3/4 of that and keep a little bit to put in right at the end for aroma. See? That's high tech. And in a moment, that'll start boiling again. And then we just have to sit and wait for an hour while it does its thing. We're going to see how this tastes. Besides the fact that it's really too hot. It's good. Bitter and sweet. Really good. So now we're going to add the rest of these hops here. But they're not going to boil for long. It's kind of like making tea. They give lots of aroma, but they don't lose the delicate flavors they have by being boiled for too long. 5 minutes they'll be in there. Those are the flavoring hops. The rest of it was for bittering. So now we're going to take this and pour it in a bucket through a strainer, which will probably fall into the bucket, but I hope not. So when this is cooled enough, we can add the yeast and it'll start fermenting on its way to beer. And that, my friends, is that. So it's been about 3 days since we brewed this batch of beer, and it's now ready to go from the primary fermenter into the secondary, which means we're going to siphon it out of this bucket and put it in here, which is really fun because I get to taste it. We're away, and really ideally we'll run this down the side of the carboy because we don't want to get too much air in it. It aerates it less, and that's important. You could drink this right now. It's actually ready to drink, but it'll be better in a week. We're done. That yeast that we put in there, that little packet of yeast, has turned into all of that. The only thing we still have to do is put this airlock on top, which lets the CO2 out. It doesn't let air in. And I like to put some alcohol in it. You can use water too, it's the same, but just being extra careful. But as it ferments, the bubbles will push this stuff. It'll bubble, pushes that, and bubbles out. So pretty much all the fermentable sugars have been fermented out of that beer now. So if we wanted to get fizzy in the bottles, we have to feed the yeast a little bit more, so they make some more gas to make bubbles in the bottles. So I'm going to put this sugar in this boiling water, and then we're going to mix it in with that whole batch before we put it in bottles. The rate of sugar that you have to put in. The amount is about 3/4 of a cup for 5 gallons of beer. We've got about 4 gallons of beer, so I'm going for about 6/10 of a cup of sugar. And I'm gonna just make a syrup. So now I'm gonna get my siphon and I'm gonna stir it with the siphon. I'll use that to stir this up a little bit, but not too much because I don't want to bring that yeast back up into the mix. This heavy white layer on the bottom, that's mostly dead yeast cells. Yeast byproducts. I think we're ready. This is the part where I taste the beer again. And it's important that you leave a little bit of space at the top, otherwise it doesn't carbonate properly. So, I'm going to take what ended up in this last bottle, which is not full, and use it to top the other ones up to show you how much airspace you should have. That's about perfect. In fact, you could probably use as a measure what you see on the shelf when you buy soda. It'd be about the same. That's it. We have beer. I think that's pretty great.